That's cool too. All right, we are ready to rock and roll. Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to this month's Maker Talk. And also welcome to the labs. So this floor right here is the labs in totality. The room that you're currently in is called the Fab Lab. And if you've never been here before, this is where we make stuff, which is why it's called the Fab Lab. Fab is short for fabrication. We do talks like this more or less every month. Next month, March, has actually already been scheduled. We're going to do a talk on commercial illustration, which is going to be pretty cool, I think. But yeah, I've already warned you guys about not getting in the line of the camera, so we don't have to do that again. And I think I'm ready to introduce our speaker. So this is Jess Collins, and Jess is going to talk about what it's like to run a crochet business. So give it up for Jess.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming this afternoon. I'm really excited to talk to you. As stated, my name is Jess Collins and I'm the owner and artist behind Winding Joy. So first thing, I'll tell you a little bit more about myself, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail about what crochet is and how it differs from other fiber arts like knitting, since they do look very similar after the fact. I'll also go into a little bit about how I come up with my ideas, how I generate patterns to actually produce products, and then we'll go into a little bit more about the business planning side behind the crochet business. So I didn't always start out wanting to be a crochet artist. When I was about 12, I was on an overseas trip with my parents. My mother got very tired of my questions, so she decided to teach me to crochet, and it worked. So I have been crocheting casually for quite a while. I just went into business last year. But in college, I was an English major and spent about 10 years working as a technical editor. And a lot of those skills have actually carried over, a bit to my surprise. So I chose the name Winding Joy because it's the philosophy I very much want to put out with my products. Joy is not something that we find lying on the street, pick up and put in our pocket. It's something we choose to look for every day in our lives. It's something we make for ourselves every day in our lives. And so these kind of items, you know, things that are cute, things that make me smile, when I put them on my desk, the harder parts of the day get just that much easier to get through because there's that little spark of joy that can just live with me all the time. So crochet itself is a fiber art, as stated. It does differ slightly from knitting, although both involve looping yarn around itself to create a fabric-like texture. So crochet uses one hook while knitting uses two needles. And one of the big differences is that a crochet stitch is finished before moving on to the next stitch, and in knitting, the stitches all remain open while they're residing on the needle, and then you close them all up in series. And because of this difference between crochet and knitting, because each stitch is closed before it's continued versus the row of open stitches, machines cannot currently crochet. So if you've ever seen a product that has been crocheted, even if it's in kind of a mass department store or something like that, it has absolutely been made by hand. Knitting machines have existed for a very long time. Odds are everyone in this room is wearing an article of knit clothing. I know I am. And so anytime you see a mass-produced knit product, it was probably made on a machine. And as I mentioned, machines cannot quite crochet yet. Each crochet stitch takes a lot of muscle movements over a series of axes, and machines can't quite keep up with the amount of different changes needed to perform each individual crochet stitch. Currently, the most advanced machine that exists can mostly perform the basic stitches of a single and double crochet, but it only successfully does it about half the time, and even when it does do it, it can only get about 4 stitches in a row, which, great advancement, but not particularly useful when you need 3,000 stitches to create a piece. So as far as artistic design, most people see this and think that 90% of it goes into the crochet item itself. And while I wish that was true, it's not entirely true. You know, there is a lot of artistic bits that go into the crochet itself. There's understanding gauge, which is how the size of your hook relates to the size of your yarn. So as you can see, this yarn is fairly fine, and so it produces a smaller item, whereas very thick yarn will produce a bigger item just because of the nature of the material. You can follow the exact same pattern and get different sizes pending the hook and the yarn that you choose. Manipulating texture, again, part of understanding not only how your yarn feels when it's rolled up in that skein that you see on, you know, the store shelf, but also how it's going to feel once it's stretched, once it's compressed, once it's wound together into these types of knots, and understanding how that fabric is going to feel and how that's going to influence the eventual shape and feel of the item. So again, for example, a very tight stitch is going to produce a much firmer fabric that generally holds its shape, whereas the loose, and most of my items include a very tight stitch because they're intended to hold stuffing. But if you use a looser stitch with that same yarn, you'll get a much softer fabric with more flow to it. Proportions is another artistic piece that many people don't necessarily think about changing in particular ways. So, for example, I have a little dragon down here. But because of how little he is, his head is extremely large. By keeping that proportion large, it ends up making it cuter. Something about big heads are just very adorable. There are tension physics, which goes into what I was describing about the fabric, where if you use a larger needle with a certain yarn, you can get a softer fabric. Understanding which way your stitches are going to pull is going to determine the final shape of your product. So here I have a piece that's currently in progress and not completely done yet. Eventually he's going to have a body with a little head on it. But as you can see, understanding where the yarn is going to pull determines how you get this curve shape. This is not multiple pieces sewn together. This is all constructed from one continuous spiral of stitches. And understanding where things are going to pull and how they're going to alter the fabric as a whole can really help you when creating pattern designs. And of course, geometry. I never expected when I first started a crochet business that I would be doing anywhere near the amount of math that I am doing now. You know, we all complained I'm never going to use math in my real life. Apparently that's not true. You use math even in art. And so all of that is just into each individual crochet item. On top of that, as far as the business itself, marketing marketing in particular takes up a lot of extra artistic resources, for lack of better phrasing. So the hang tags on each item where I list the price and the care instructions, those all had to be designed. I designed these myself, but a lot of people will hire a graphic designer. So it either comes down to an expense or a time investment. There's also business cards, learning how to set up a display like this to help steer the customer's eye, learning how to set up your booth to draw people in, make it welcome. Photography is another item that I didn't quite expect to need as thoroughly as I do, but having a good picture to post on your online store makes a very big difference. And so even though crochet is the heart of the artistic part of the business, there's so many other factors that still get to be pulled in. As I said, generating some of my ideas will come to me organically. I'm a little bit of a nerd. So for example, I'm a big fan of Brandon Sanderson. He has a series in which these little slug creatures appear called Taenix. And as a fan of the series, when the author released a crochet pattern, I simply had to. So, you know, that's where some things come from. These little cati. I had a friend moving into town, and she wasn't able to bring any of her plants with her, and her cats weren't going to be able to live with her for a couple of weeks. So in the meantime, I made her a combination of her plants and her cats. And those have become one of my best sellers. Everyone loves them. The top two pictures you see here of the rubber duck and the tarantula, those were actually custom requests. I had someone message me and say, hey, I'm really looking for this item to add to my collection, but I haven't seen it anywhere. Can you make one? And sure enough. So some of these ideas are organic. Some of them come from, like I said, customer requests. There's also trend reports. Etsy and a lot of other third-party sites will put out statistics on what colors are selling, what kind of items people are putting in their home. Are people going more minimalist or more extravagant? And you can use those to inform some of the pieces. Let's see. For creating patterns, there's really 3 different ways to approach pattern making. The first is to pattern from scratch, which is where you take a blank piece of paper and your yarn and your hook, and you start trying things out and see what works. That is often the safest method to go as far as copyright protection, because crochet patterns are copyrighted. And so copying someone's pattern, posting it on your website, or posting the pattern itself for sale is not acceptable. But within crochet copyright law, products made from other crochet patterns are allowed to be sold so long as they're credited. So often, to avoid the issue of making sure you're crediting the right person and making sure the credit is in all the right places, patterning yourself can be an option. But it requires more steps. Sketching out the actual product itself and breaking that down into pieces. As I said, this is an example of a piece that I'm currently working on. This is the prototype so far. I believe I made this head 5 times before I finally came to this shape. And this one is still a work in progress. We'll see if this is what it ends up looking like. But the biggest part of it is always experimenting, because even if you've done all the math and all the math checks out, once you go, putting hook to yarn, sometimes it can turn out differently. So a lot of this is just reiteration, practice, trying it out, going, well, that's not what I expected, undoing it and doing it all again. You can use existing patterns. As I said, you can go online, find someone who's created, let's say, a free pattern for a cat, and as long as you attribute the pattern designer, those products are for sale. A nice middle ground that I like to find is modifying an existing pattern. So I'll find a pattern that's been released, someone's done the math, they've done the majority of the work in getting that shape to where they want it to be. And from there, I can go in and hone down on the details and simply modify those parts of the pattern. Now, credit still needs to be given to the pattern designer, because as I said, they did the brunt of the work. They did the majority of the shaping. But by adding those small details, it adds a little bit more character to the individual item, rather than simply being the same pattern that you'll see in many other crochet stores. Here's a few examples of patterns that I've either created from scratch or patterns that I've modified. As you can see, they don't have to be very fancy. My chicken scratch and little doodles serve perfectly well when you're formulating these things. You can always type it up later. But you can see up here, there's lots of numbers going on, lots of math, trying to make sure that the gauge that I'm using matches up with the final size that I'd like to achieve. And so plenty of equations, and then sometimes they're just little doodles with notes. So now on to the business planning portion. Again, most of this seems like very artistic, abstract kind of concepts, but most of my time is spent making the business function as a business. Research was the critical piece for everything. I'm constantly doing more research on new crochet techniques, things to speed up my actual production time, ways to make yarn go a little bit farther so I don't use quite as much when producing a product. Even the company name took a lot of research when I first started out, because there's a lot of factors that go into it, like a domain name, like social media handles, making sure that those were available and were within the company budget, was very important. If I had gone through and made hang tags and made business cards and designed everything with the best name I could think of, but couldn't get the social media handle to match, it makes it so much harder for customers to find you that it ends up hurting you in the long run. There's, of course, the finance part of it, making sure that you can keep all of your expenses straight because taxes are a thing, and so we have to keep track of that. But it's also very important to research any legal requirements. So I'm in the state of Maryland. My business is located in Maryland, and so I had to go through my county and my state and the federal level to make sure that the business was registered in every location for the sake of taxes. So if you're planning to start any kind of business like this, I highly recommend doing extensive research to make sure all of those little check boxes are marked. As I was saying, more with research, checking the market, making sure that there is actually a market for your products. If I were to go online and search up crochet cats and couldn't find a single one across the entirety of the internet, that could tell me that there's a market to break into, but it could also mean that other people have tried it and it didn't sell, so they simply took it down. They didn't expend their resources on it because it didn't get them anywhere. And learning the difference between those two, of course, takes some practice and some skill development, but the more you look into it, the more that becomes a natural process. You know, most people think of the market as the demographics of the people they're selling to, age, location, gender, things like that. But I generally tend to group my customers more in the sense of milestone events. Is it someone that's just graduating college and moving into a new place? Is it someone who just got married and starting something else? You know, any kind of milestone event will generally help hone down those other details of age, location, gender, etc. As I mentioned, with researching the company name, the domain name and social media handles that you're able to get are important. Domain names can vary drastically as far as how much they cost. So finding one that's within an affordable range is much easier than, say, choosing to name your company Amazon and trying to get Amazon.com might be a little bit more pricey. Investment levels. So when you're first starting out, there are a lot of upfront costs that you can control to an extent, or you can exchange for more time investment. So for example, I lost my train of thought, I apologize. For example, when choosing a bank account, some bank accounts will give you money back when you invest, like when you deposit money. But those bank accounts may have a monthly fee that you have to take into account. Others might have free bank accounts, but they might not offer all the features or rebates or things like that that other bank accounts will offer. And there's multiple items that fall under that structure where you can essentially trade service for initial upfront cost. And that kind of comes down to a balancing act with the rest of the finances in the company and how you're planning to sell and distribute. More on finances, because again, there are a number of things that I didn't think of when I first started, such as particularly point of sale software. Knowing what, if your point of sale software will charge any fees with transactions, knowing how it works, making sure that you can get your money from that point of sale software into your bank account so that you can get paid. Financial trackers and credit cards, all of these essentially just make it easy to isolate the business transactions and keep track of them. Obviously I run a crochet business, but I also crochet on my own. If I buy a skein of yarn for myself, I have to make sure it doesn't get mixed in with my business finances. Having a business credit card makes it very easy to just say, nope, everything on this list goes to the company, everything else is everywhere else. As I mentioned before, the company name can affect costs. because domain names can vary and social media handles can have limited availability. If my social media handle was Crochet Goddess, people might not associate that with Winding Joy because those names are entirely different, even though they're both related to crochet. Valuing your art is always a bit of a tricky point. Primarily because it's art, it is subjective, and therefore, to an extent, the value is considered subjective. There are dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of ways that people have priced out their products in crochet in any business. There's hundreds of equations, but finding the one that works best for you is always my recommendation. Personally, I have a very extensive Excel spreadsheet that I let do all the math for me. I set up the calculations and just let it go. But knowing how simple or how complex you want that equation to be when you're pricing a product, knowing how much you're going to get as a return on investment when selling it. Undervaluing the work is a very easy kind of pit to slip into, particularly with material costs. So as you'll see with most of my items, there's little embroidery, there's little bits of thread for the whiskers, or there's safety eyes, or other small features like that. Making sure that I include each of those costs into the price of the item is important, because when I first started, I had the instinct of, it's like 2 cents of thread. I don't need to throw that in there. But once you get to 40 items and 50 items and 100 items, those 2 cents start to add up. Not only that, not tracking those details makes it harder for you to keep track of what's selling well. Maybe that one item was selling really well because it had yellow eyes and everyone really liked the yellow eyes. If you don't keep track of the yellow eyes, now you don't know what that investment is actually getting you back in sales. Overhead costs also add up quickly. Each of these boxes costs money. The PowerPoint software itself costs money for the subscription. Business cards, hang tags, all of these little details end up adding up. And even though you can't necessarily pinpoint, this subscription package is broken down into 5 cents for each item, that gets a little complicated. But making sure that those costs are calculated for somewhere in the equation will save a lot of time in figuring out why your profits aren't going up. Fees and shipping are another big aspect that can end up eating into profits. Remembering that third-party websites might charge posting fees or transaction fees, remembering that the point-of-sale software might charge transaction fees, or odds are if you're selling online, you're gonna have to ship your product since your next-door neighbor probably isn't the person ordering online from you. And deciding whether you're going to charge the customer for that shipping cost or include it in your price is all part of the calculation. So often I get, how did you know you were ready to start a crochet business? And that's the neat thing, you don't. It is easy to get stuck in the research mode. To say, I've got to do more research, I've got to find out more, I don't know enough information to get started. And that is correct. No matter how much research, no matter how much preparation you do, there are going to be knowledge gaps that you find yourself with. You are going to find yourself in situations where you go, you know what? I don't know how to handle that, but apparently I have to, so here we go. And being prepared for those to happen, knowing that those are going to happen and that you can still take the next step forward is the most vital thing to remember. You're never going to know if you're entirely ready. No one's ever able to be entirely ready. Everything could be going absolutely perfect and then a national pandemic could hit. Who knows? So the more you have to learn, the more room you have to grow. So if you're questioning or not sure, just remember that those knowledge gaps will get filled in as you practice. So thank you everyone so much for coming. And I think we're opening it up to questions now. So
Yeah. So it's time for the Q&A.
yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Jess. Okay, so we're gonna do this Q&A in a particular way. You're gonna raise your hand, and then I'm gonna come over to you and hand you the microphone, because if you do not ask your question into the microphone, the people in the live stream will not be able to hear you. So if you have a question, go. We have 15 minutes. Okay.
Thanks. I was wondering if you could talk about how you balance making things for your business and then making things because you enjoy the creation, and how do you separate that, work enjoyment balance for a hobby?
Okay, great question. So for me, separating work crochet from enjoyment crochet does get a little fuzzy at times. Sometimes I will want to make something and then go, well, wait, maybe I could sell that, and then things get muddled. Generally, I try to use my time of day to set me apart. I'll do essentially my work things in the morning, and then at the end of the day, if I'm feeling kind of creatively exhausted or I just need to zone out, I will choose items that are very different from my work items. So instead of, small stuffed creatures like this are called amigurumi. And so if I need to relax with crochet, instead of amigurumi, I might make a top or a sweater or a bowl or a cat toy or something along those lines, where I'm significantly less concerned about the measurements of the final product. And I can just say, hook goes in the yarn and hook comes out of the yarn, and hook goes in the yarn and hook comes out of the yarn. So I hope that answered your question.
What made you want to make the jump from just crocheting for yourself to starting an actual business that was going to make money?
Great question. So let me do the math real. So it's about a year and a half ago. There was a contract change in the job I was at, and I ended up going freelance with editing. And I found that it was fine. It worked, it got the bills paid, but there was very little passion for me behind it, driving me and generating that motivation to keep going forward. Shortly after I left that job, I discovered amigurumi patterns, and after making a few of them, I was completely addicted. I was like, I can make any shape I want, I can make any animal I want, and it's all made of yarn. So when I found that spark of passion in it, I realized that was enough to keep me burning through the hard parts, through the parts that were a little bit of a slog and a little bit more of a job. It was that spark for creativity and being able to see people smile when they saw my products. Very few things make me happier than standing at a craft fair and having someone walk up, see a piece, and just go. And that just brings me so much joy that I wanted to make it everything I could.
Well, I have a question. What is your favorite kind of yarn, and why do you love it so much?
Ooh, favorite kind of yarn.
I know this is a hard question.
I was about to say that one's tricky. I would say as far as content, I am a big fan of bamboo rayon. It's so silky and nice. It's very lovely to work with. As far as weight, as far as how thick of a yarn I like to work with, I generally prefer the finer worsted weight yarns, because they can give me such nice fine details when structuring.
Do you have any markets or shows coming up that people would maybe want to attend?
I'm afraid my show schedule is still currently in the works, so I do not have any any currently scheduled, but after the presentation is over, you're welcome to take a business card. I do post all of my future shows on my website, so you're welcome to come and see.
Okay. Last call for questions. Okay, we got more.
How do you keep your like wrists and hands from getting like repetitive stress injuries?
Oh, excellent question.
This is a serious question, yes.
So part of that is actual wrist exercises. I actually do wrist and finger strengthening exercises occasionally. I also use support gloves. So the compression gloves, they have some that are slightly thinner and meant for crafting. So those will go over my fingers and all the way down to just below my wrist to help provide some support. I also use ergonomic crochet hooks, which are designed to help your hand rest in a position similar to like a vertical mouse. It helps your arm rest in a position where you're not putting a lot of torque on your wrist. I also have a Theragun that I use when none of those keep the pain away.
Do you have any crochet resources that you could recommend for people? Like, is there a book that you really adore or a YouTube channel that you always go back to?
Oh, excellent question. So there is a particular brand of crochet hook that I highly recommend for experts or beginners alike, and that's the Clover Moore brand of crochet hook. It's an aluminum hook. It's delightful to work with. As far as learning to crochet, I actually recommend going online and finding a creator that you respond with. Different people will teach crochet in different ways. And so finding someone who works as quickly as you want, who uses the terminology that you respond to, is probably the most helpful.
Final call. Any more questions, comments, concerns? Not too concerned about crochet, that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you all again for attending, and thank you, Jess, for
Thank you for
giving
having
us
me.
this
Thank you all
talk.
for coming.
Yeah. Just final note, this is for our newcomers and the new people on the stream. This entire talk is going to be archived on our YouTube channel, which is DC Public Library. So if you want to watch this talk again, you can go on there and do that. It will be up there for as long as we have YouTube, so perpetually. And please stay tuned for our talk in March, which is about commercial illustration. You can't sign up for it quite yet. We're just a couple days away from that. But check out our website. Look under Martin Luther King Library events and the Labs events in particular, and you will see it in the next couple days. And thank you all so much.
Thank you.